Good afternoon. Welcome to Congregation Shir Hamalot's Influencers and Inspirers. We're so glad to have you with us. And I want to welcome Mayor Darrell Steinberg, who I happen to know quite well. I've known him all my life, actually. Welcome, Darrell. We're glad you're here.
Good to be with you, Rabbi Steinberg. Thank you for having me. I have not known you all of my life. The first 8 years, I did not know you. But since then, we've been very close.
That is true. I just want to remind you, at the Bible, the youngest child always supplants the oldest child. So just something to think about during this interview.
And that has borne out as true, of course, throughout our lifetimes. And I'm happy about that. You know, you are a great leader in your temple and in your community. And, you know, I'm proud of you.
Thank you, as I am of you. Let me just mention, we are actually taping this on April 1st. And because the world is changing so rapidly, who knows what will happen in the next 2 weeks. This airs on April 15th. So I just wanted to make that clear. And this afternoon, as I have done with all of our people that we've interviewed, I want to talk about your career and about your kind of vision of life in the public eye, and to talk about the future a bit as well. So just a little background on Darrell. Darrell began his political career as a city councilman in the city of Sacramento, became an assemblyman in the State House, then became a state senator, and for 6 of the 8 years was the leader of the state Senate, and for the last 4 years has been the mayor of our capital city in California, Sacramento. And so really an illustrious and long career of public service. But Darrell, as I think about your political career, I think it begins when you're a child running for student body president and whatnot, but a significant story that stands out in my mind, but I can't tell it as well as you can, is when you were in law school at UC Davis. And there was a friend who was in a wheelchair and he didn't have access. If you could walk us through that story, if you feel that that's a story that really spoke to you. A moment that spoke to you.
It's a story that I know has been told, and I've told a number of times, and I'm happy to share it again. And it's usually in response to the question, what motivated you? What was your spark? And, you know, I speak to a lot of young people, and I always encourage them to find their spark, to find what's in their heart, because it can lead you to good and great places. And for me, I was, first of all, a freshman at Cal Berkeley and lived in the dorm complex that housed the Center for Independent Living, which is sort of the national center of advocacy for disability rights. And I met a number of students who were severely physically disabled, and yet they were so normal to me. We'd talk sports, we'd hang out, and I was just always awed by their abilities as opposed to their disabilities. And then I got to law school, and at UC Davis, the law school was in one sense ahead of its time in that they admitted students with physical disabilities long before the Americans with Disabilities Act passed in Congress, which was, I believe, 1990, and I was in law school from 81 to 84. But the law school itself, though they admitted students, the physical plant, the physical space of the law school was not accessible in many respects. In fact, when it came to arguing as trial advocates in the moot court program, those of us who were able-bodied were able to work in the courtroom as they had set it up at the law school with the jury box and the judge elevated, and it was authentic. It was not accessible. And so a couple of my colleagues who were quadriplegic had to go down to a small classroom to do their trial practice and didn't have the same experience. And so the three of us decided that we were going to approach the university and ask them, the law school, and ask if they would build a lift in the moot courtroom. And they said, of course we will, we just need the money. And so I kept persisting, as did my colleagues, Mimi and Mike. By the way, great people. Amy Jones, a polio victim who was not a victim, you know, since passed away, but, and Mike Dooner, who was a star athlete who had been injured in a in an automobile accident. He too has passed away. But both of them could not literally turn the page of the heavy case books, and yet were in law school and succeeding and doing well. And they became my friends. And the three of us pushed for this lift. And the law school kept telling us they just needed the money. They'd get the money, and they're trying, but they couldn't get it. And finally, I got a little tired of it. And I went over to the main administration building at UC Davis and asked the dean in charge, or chancellor in charge of facilities, when can the law school get the money? And he looked at me with surprise on his face. He said, I don't know what you mean. He said, we offered the law school the money many months ago. They said they didn't want it. They didn't want it because they didn't want to change the aesthetic look of the courtroom. And I said, are you kidding? I said, did they put that in writing? And he said, yes, they did. I said, would you mind if I got a copy of the letter? And he said, sure, it's a public document. And he gave me the copy of the letter, and I had it on the front page of the Davis newspapers within a couple of days, and within 4 months the lift was built. And for me, that was a moment I talk about, my spark, where I understood the power of advocacy and the ability to make change. And in that case, it was small change, but it was profound for the people affected. And it gave me that bit of confidence that if I took my education and I took my passion and I translated it into advocacy, that I could make a difference. And I have been fortunate to be in those positions where I could make a difference. But that was where it started for me.
Wow, it's a very powerful story. And as you say, simple, but if a person doesn't take the action to go over to the main admin building, then it never comes to fruition. It takes somebody who's really willing to make the effort to do it.
You know, yes. But the lesson is never be afraid, especially never be afraid to do something on behalf of others. Never be afraid to take a risk. What was the worst thing that could happen? Right? They tell me to go get lost, and and then I would have tried again. But taking a little bit of a risk or putting yourself out there can lead to good and great things for people. And everybody has power. They don't necessarily feel it unless they exercise it. And I was a young man. I was not elected to anything. I had no title. I just did something, and it resulted in something good.
So let's fast forward, Darrell, and I should probably say, as the interviewer, I am probably biased, but so I'll put that out there. But your two passion issues are homelessness and mental illness, and you're one of the few politicians I know who advocates relentlessly for people who don't necessarily raise money for you or vote or are involved in the political process as much as some other constituencies might be. So I'm always very proud of that fact that you basically speak for those who don't have a voice. So fast forwarding from UC Davis to even today, and I don't know if you want to take each issue separately, but they are so interrelated in many ways. Just kind of the state of where we are in our nation with regards to homelessness and mental illness. And tell me if you want to do them separately or together.
Well, why don't we start with mental illness
Okay.
and mental health, or brain health as we call it now. I started on this path, and really the story that I told about UC Davis is relevant because I developed this passion for disability advocacy. And I always say the flip side of disability is ability. And it's up to us whether or not we provide the opportunity for people with disabilities to show their abilities. And so when I was a young council member, I got interested in homelessness because it was an issue that affected my community, obviously still does today. And then I ran for the assembly, and I got some good advice. And I think this is good life advice as well, from a former assembly member who was, knew the ropes. He said, your time is going to come and go. It's true of the legislature, it's true of life. Your time is going to come and go. He said, you could choose to work on a lot of issues that everyone else is working on and make a difference and be part of the collective voice. And that's important. He said, but my recommendation to you is you pick an issue or two that nobody else is working on. It's not high on the political pop charts. It's not sexy. It isn't something that is necessarily going to gain you a lot of attention, but it's an issue you can own and that you can drive. Because when it's all said and done, when you cast those thousands of votes and you participated in this or that debate, the democracy moves on, you move on. What will you be known for? And what mark did you make? And so I listened to that and I said, you know, decades earlier, the state shut the state hospitals for good reason and promised a decent system of community mental health care. In fact, I went back and looked at the Ronald Reagan gubernatorial papers in the Department of Finance, typewritten finance report, when they passed the Deinstitutionalization Act, known as Lanterman-Petra Short. The Reagan administration promised that 90% of the money saved from closing the hospitals would be spent on community care. And of course, it was a promise that in many respects was abjectly unfulfilled. And so I worked with a coalition and led a coalition to pass Prop 63, which is known as the Mental Health Services Act, generates $2.5 billion every year for public mental health. And it's a gift from the people of California and has literally, changed the lives of tens of thousands of people and helped save lives. It's not perfect, but I know counties like in Orange County have used the Mental Health Services Act in ways to really create new, innovative approaches to helping people. I would say that when I started in this area, there were very few legislators, very few people that wanted to talk about it and wanted to take it on. And I'm pleased to say that in 2021, that mental health has not quite there yet, but it's almost having its moment where it's become mainstream. And COVID has helped. COVID has helped. That doesn't sound right. COVID, which has been a terrible thing, has also elevated the issues of mental health because so many people are suffering as a result of the isolation. And so we have a movement. It's a movement, and the movement is growing. There is increased recognition that mental health is no different than physical health. We're busting stigma because more people are telling their stories. People would never talk about their own mental health issues. Now people do readily, and that's a good and healthy thing. And we're getting more public attention, more money, and more resources than ever before. And so now it's time to fix the systems that oftentimes are fragmented, where it's hard to access care, where it's hard to access preventative care. People should get the help they need before they get really sick. All of that is our work ahead. And homelessness is related to mental illness and unrelated, because not everybody who's homeless is mentally ill. Certainly economics play a huge role, but for those who are chronically homeless, mental health and substance abuse are huge factors. And we have a societal problem here in that we view housing and services for people as an option, as opposed to a requirement. And I think that needs to change. We know what to do to help people. We know how to save people. We just got to bring it all to scale. And we got to change the public policy that provides a much stronger incentive or a requirement for cities, counties, the state, and the country to actually bring people indoors and to give them the help that they need.
Thank you for that thoughtful response. I think, with respect to mental illness, if people complain about the money we're spending, what people don't understand is the more we invest in treating people early, the more money it saves. For every dollar we spend on pediatric mental health, it saves $7 in adult mental health, whether that's in the justice system, in the emergency room, wherever it might be. This is to help our economy or our financial situation, and it's also the moral and right thing to do, by the way. So, these investments, while they seem like big numbers, are nothing compared to what it costs not to do anything. And it's the same with homelessness too.
It's so true. It starts with the basic notions of prevention. The truth is, once somebody enters the system, whatever the system is, we're already far behind.
Yeah.
Once somebody has suffered a life-altering illness and suffered the terrible pain of breaking down or being in the hospital or being in jail, we're already far behind. Think about early psychosis identification intervention, coined to the realm, evidence-based practices, where if we intervene with young people who maybe are showing some signs and or have a family history, and we get them the intensive wraparound help that they need and include their families, all of the studies show that that leads to so many better outcomes. And yes, saves money, but the money thing to me is secondary. It's about saving lives, and it's about people should not have to suffer so much. And think about how routine it is now for us to treat so-called physical health conditions early. Um, and we've got to get to the same place with mental health.
Absolutely. Well, you said its moment has come, and I'll refer people to an article I think you wrote in May for the LA Times about the next epidemic being the mental health crisis because of what COVID has caused for so many, particularly our young people. But politically speaking, this is an issue that crosses all lines. I mean, Orange County is really a model of politics put to the side, everybody coming together to address an issue that affects all of our families. And everybody knows somebody who's struggling with a mental health issue.
So if Rick, if you want to, Rabbi Rick, if you want to be purely political about this, I think what many politicians miss is that focusing on mental health is a politically resonant issue. It's good politics. And that's not the reason to do it, but human nature being what it is, there's an incredible constituency out there. And you're right, it's a nonpartisan constituency. It crosses all of those artificial barriers that divide us. And a politician who chooses to champion this issue is going to get a lot of support. I know I did.
And you've used your leadership, and that's kind of where I want to go now, in such effective ways, meeting with presidents of the United States, with leaders all over the world on these issues. How would you describe your leadership style, Darrell?
Well, the rap on me in politics has always been, is he too nice? Which I always laugh at because you can't be, because I have humbly been effective, right? And so what is the key? I do not believe you have to be a jerk to succeed in life or in politics. And in fact, you get much more with people, from people, and for people if you try to be a good person and as much of a listener as you are a talker, a collaborator. But the thing that sometimes people miss with, quote, nice people is that they don't always see the velvet glove behind it, because you don't succeed in life by being a pushover, certainly not in politics. And so my style is I'm unafraid to speak truth to power. I am a dog on a bone. I am very persistent in pursuing my objectives. I work hard, which, there's no substitute for hard work. And I practice my craft because politics and representative government serving is a craft. And I have had some losses, there's no question. But I've also had some great successes. And I've also made a lot of great friends along the way. And that's rewarding too, but I just want to ask this question, and it's an opportunity for me to say to the people who will be viewing this that I really push back on the notion that in politics you have to be, this kind of sharp-elbowed, mean person or sharp-elbowed to get ahead. Sometimes you have to show a sharp elbow when people least expect it, but you get a lot more just by trying to care about somebody else, while being principled and persistent and being open to another point of view. You succeed. In the end, it's about being effective, and the style that I've employed, which is not intentional, it's just we all are who we are, has worked well for me, and I commend it to others.
Well, you have a really wonderful thing you do where you begin every meeting with the corniest, worst joke you can think of, and then it puts people at ease. So, but it works because
It works.
when people smile, they're able to communicate. But it seems to me that there are two competing skills for politicians. The skills you need to get elected are quite different than the skills you need to lead. And it's really problematic. I mean, you never see two politicians on the dais debating each other, complimenting them on what nice people they are and how they're terrific. They just happen to disagree with their politics. It's so nasty today. It's so mean spirited. It's so cutthroat. Do you have hope that it will change?
I do, but I also worry about the polarization in the country and in society. I don't think social media helps very much, to be honest with you, because I think it allows people to cheap shot much more easily uh, than being face to face with somebody or having real conversation. Yeah, I do worry about it, but we all have to try to model the behavior that we want to see in others, and none of us are perfect. I'm not perfect. I've lost my temper once or twice, but let me tell you where there is some commonality, though, between good politics and serving. And I think about what it takes to win a state legislative office or a congressional office, or certainly a city council office. It's shoe leather. You knock on doors, you meet with people. That has nothing to do with your opponent, by the way. That has everything to do with you and your willingness to persist and work hard to try to achieve the goal of representing the people. And then once you're in office, it's that same skill set. You are walking the halls of your legislature. You're meeting with members. You are taking your idea and you're elevating it and pushing it. And so there is some commonality between what it takes to get elected and what it takes to serve. But here's the thing about politics and politicians: we're no different than society. You look at any profession, you look at any community, you have people of all temperaments, all characters, all beliefs, all philosophies. And so, do you have people in politics who do not live up to the ideal? Well, of course. Do you have people who are temperamentally unsuited? Of course. Do you have some people that are not honest? Yes. But by and large, what I found is that people who choose public service do so for the right reasons, and people are of varying effectiveness depending upon how they choose to approach it and who they are.
I like to tell this story that when our mom found your official Facebook page, she went on it and saw some not very nice statements from people. And she started to comment, "That's my son. He's a very good man. Don't do that." Our other brother, Jeff, and I had to say, "Mom, you can't comment on Facebook about Darrell." And, because you're my brother and because I love you, I care about you, I see oftentimes the stress of the negativity and the vitriol and you're a nice guy. Think about the guys who don't play nice and what vitriol they get. How does that weigh on you as a leader, trying to do good in the world, and yet it's not that they're disagreeing with your policies. They're really talking about your character, of which they know nothing about.
Well, I will tell you, on the one hand, here are two maybe contrary notions, but they go together. Number one, I've been doing this now. I've been in elective office. This is my 25th year. And without question, my skin has gotten a lot thicker over time. When I first started, if there was a negative reference to me in the newspaper that maybe anybody else would not think was negative, but I saw some negativity in it, oh my God, I'd be upset for a week or longer. And of course, over time, as I've been through more battles and more chapters, I let much more go now easily and don't take it as personally. On the other hand, I would say that this experience as mayor for the past 4+ years has been distinct from my other chapters, and in some ways much harder. And I don't know whether it's the job itself, because the mayor is the man, or who kind of is the repository of everybody's frustration, anger, maybe sometimes happiness if something, when things go right. But it's much more personal being mayor. Combine that with the social media, which we talked about earlier, and how easy it is for people to take the cheap shots, to the times that we're living in. I mean, the trial of George Floyd, the killing of George Floyd, we had Stephon Clark, which was a very terrible circumstance and situation, an officer-involved shooting of an unarmed African-American man in his grandmother's backyard. Society is roiling in the last 4 years of the presidency, all of it. It's a much more emotional time. In some ways, it's a time of reckoning for society about a lot of real injustice. And so I bear a lot of it, and it has an impact on me. And it may be that I'm a little bit older too, but I do get down more than I have gotten down in the past. I still rebound quickly, relatively quickly, but it has had more of an effect on me. And so I try to use that in a positive way, and for it to deepen my understanding of, for example, of the fight for racial justice and economic inclusion and all the other issues that I'm responsible for helping to make better. And, but I know, well, I got another thought, but I'll wait for your next question. Go ahead.
Well, it's a perfect segue into your faith. You're Jewish, and
how did you know that, by the way?
It's a guess, just a lucky guess. Happy Passover, by the way.
Happy Passover.
Tell me, how has your Judaism influenced your life, particularly your public life? And is that ever kind of a negative? I mean, I know that Jews are focused on by the people who have a lot of hate in the world as well. And so just curious, how your faith positively and maybe negatively has affected.
Well, in the positive way, it's all positive, but especially positive in that, and this, you hear this from a lot of Reform Jews and anybody in any form of public life. It's all about Jewish values. Obviously, it's all about that great sense of obligation to heal the world and to help people in need. What is the meaning of life? What is a life well lived? What is our obligation as Jews and as people who have been given so much? And so it without question, infuses everything that I am about, and everything that I do. In this era, it's interesting. During this era of great reckoning again, where I am a middle-aged white male who is a leader. Am I a middle-aged white male, or am I a middle-aged Jewish white male? And I know I'm both, but in terms of the way that I've seen, in the way that I am seen, and is the fact that I'm Jewish, do I represent one of the diversity elements in California and in our society? I believe I do, and I believe that the the Jewish experience and the suffering of our people has made me more committed to trying to help alleviate the suffering of others as well. So I just look at it as a source of pride and as an obligation in all the right ways.
Wonderful. I want to take this opportunity to mention our other brother, Jeff, because I know we'll both get phone calls. That's why he wasn't on this panel as well. And Jeff is a leader in his own right, running the Sojourn Project, which takes teenagers from all over the country on tours of the civil rights movement, teaching about that period of history in our country, and really relating it not just on a historical level, but on a soul level as well. The Sojourn Project, a great project for teenagers and for really our whole country. So I just want to give Jeff a shout out as well.
We are very proud of him and the work he does. It's transforming.
Yeah. Absolutely. Darrell, any questions you thought I might ask that I didn't?
Well, I guess there's another aspect of our Jewish faith, right, that resonates for me, and that is hope. And in this sense, and this is something that I always, again, talk to young people about, and something that was passed on to me that really has stuck with me, that there are two kinds of people in life and certainly in politics. And, you know, it may be oversimplified, but I think it makes a point. There are the short-termers and the long-timers. The short-termers are those who get passionate about an issue or get interested in something, and then they get involved and they realize that it's hard. You've got the separation of powers. You've got things don't move as fast as you want. Progress can seem either too slow or not happening at all. There are setbacks. You lose once in a while. And they get frustrated with the fact that they can't make it, whatever it is, happen. And they leave, never to be heard from again. And they're not bad people, but they then turn it over to those who may have a different point of view than they do. And then there are the long-termers. And those are the people who decide that they're going to dedicate their lives to something. And by the way, it doesn't have to be in politics. They're going to dedicate their lives to something. And they're going to stick with it. And they're going to see the world always as hopeful. And they're going to keep working at it. And they're going to take the setbacks. And they're going to get up again. And they're going to keep going forward. And you know what the long-termers get? They get to look back over 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, a lifetime, and say, look what I was part of, or look at what I helped make happen, or look at the progress we've made together on what I care about. And I always tell young people, be a long-termer in life, because not only do you get to look back, but you also get to live the journey, and you get to have a great life. You know, you get to experience, you get that gift of never being bored or wondering what the meaning of life is, because you're living it. And that to me is a Jewish value.
Well, indeed. In fact, the Talmud tells us you're not obligated to complete the task, but neither are you free to abstain from it. And that task is improving the world. So you can't say to yourself, I'm going to make the world complete and, you know, make it the messianic time, but I have to do my part, and I'm not free to abstain from it. And those are long-termers, to be sure, and get meaning out of life and take, I think, society to the next level. And I think, my brother, you are a leader in that way, and have not only done it for yourself, but brought you know, your constituents and those whom you represent along with you to a better and a higher and a holier place. So thank you for your time today. Thank you for your service, and thank you for being a great brother. I love you.
Love you, brother. Great goatee, by the way. Love the goatee. I have to grow one myself.